The Kings of Monte Carlo, the most successful players in the tournament's history. Outside of the four majors, Monte Carlo might just be the jewel in the crown of tennis, the most glamorous and arguably the most prestigious Masters tournament, whose center court is not just the most beautiful stadium in tennis but quite possibly the most beautiful stadium in any sport. But who are the Kings of Monte Carlo, the most successful champions in the long history of the tournament? If the number one on that list is relatively easy to guess, the other entrants certainly are not, but just because their names may not be instantly familiar does not mean that their stories are not fascinating. Indeed, given that one of them was a war hero in addition to being a top tennis player, their stories are probably more fascinating than those of many more familiar names. Here then are the 5 Kings of Monte Carlo, the elite group of players who have won the most titles in the most glittering of Mediterranean settings. Stefanos Tsitsipas, Thomas Muster, Bjorn Borg, Ilie Nastase, Nicola Pietrangeli, Henri Cochet and Gordon Lowe, 3 titles each. Until his quarter-final defeat to Lorenzo Musetti, Stefanos Tsitsipas had the chance to break the tightest of logjams by winning Monte Carlo for a 4th time, but for now he remains one of 7 players to have won the title 3 times. Even more remarkably, the other 6 players who he is currently tied with for joint 5th on the list of the most successful players in the history of the tournament are all major winners, having each secured at least one Grand Slam singles title, something that Tsitsipas, of course, is yet to do. Indeed, many of the other 6 players besides Tsitsipas to have won Monte Carlo 3 times won multiple major singles titles. For example, Ilie Nastase won a hat-trick of titles in Monte Carlo between 1971 and 1973 in addition to his 2 major singles titles, 1 US Open and 1 French Open, while Bjorn Borg won 3 Monte Carlo titles out of 4 between 1977 and 1980, more or less coinciding with his 4 successive French Open titles between 1978 and 1981. To go with the 2 Roland Garros titles that he won earlier in the decade in 1974 and 1975. The records of Nastase and Borg hint at one of the main attractions of Monte Carlo. It always marks the start of the European clay court season, but it also often acts as a reliable marker of who will go on to win the French Open either later in the season or later in their career. In fact, of the 6 men besides Tsitsipas to win 3 Monte Carlo titles, only Britain's Gordon Lowe, who achieved his hat-trick in the early 1920s, failed to go on to triumph at Roland Garros. So, notwithstanding his failure to win a 4th Monte Carlo title in 2025, Tsitsipas will hope that one day he can translate his Monte Carlo form into Paris success. Lawrence Doherty, 4 titles, 1900, 1901, 1905 and 1906. Long before Andy and Jamie Murray, the first great British tennis brothers were the Dohertys, Lawrence and Reginald, who between them won an extraordinary 10 Monte Carlo singles titles, sharing the title between themselves for a decade between 1897 and 1906. Lawrence, the younger of the 2, won 4 titles, twice winning the tournament in consecutive years. Lawrence Doherty did not just excel on clay, because he also won the Wimbledon singles title 5 times in succession between 1902 and 1906 and in addition became the first foreign player to win the U.S. Championships, now the U.S. Open, in 1903. And although he never won the French Open, he did achieve a remarkable hat-trick at the 1900 Olympics in Paris, when he won gold in both singles and doubles and a bronze in the mixed doubles. Doherty was obviously one of the greatest sportsmen of his generation, but later in life he was bedeviled by illness and eventually killed by it. When World War I began in 1914, like so many other sportsmen at the time he signed up for military service, but less than a decade after his incredible achievements in tennis he was discharged from the armed forces because of poor health. He eventually died in 1919, aged just 43, having contracted both tubercular nephritis, a severe inflammation of the kidneys, and cystitis, a severe urinary tract illness. Anthony Wilding, 5 titles, 1908, 1911, 1912, 1913 and 1914. New Zealander Anthony Wilding is not just one of the kings of Monte Carlo but is often regarded as the first superstar of tennis, predating even Suzanne Lenglen and Bill Tilden, who between them did so much to promote the popularity of the sport globally after World War I. Wilding's glory years came before the Great War, when he won not only 5 Monte Carlo titles but even more impressively 4 Wimbledon titles in succession between 1910 and 1913 and 2 Australian Championships, now the Australian Open, in 1906 and 1909. Like so many Victorian and Edwardian sportsmen, Wilding was not just a tennis specialist but a great all-rounder, also excelling at cricket and motorcycling. But all of his sporting achievements were curtailed by World War I, and eventually his life was ended by it. Like so many men from Britain's empire at the time, he joined up almost immediately after war began in Europe and tragically was killed in May 1915, within the first year of the conflict, when an artillery shell struck the trench he was in. Reginald, the older of the 2 Doherty brothers who dominated the first decade of the Monte Carlo tournament, was also the original RF of tennis. His middle name was Frank, and like so many late Victorians and Edwardians he was known by his initials, over a century before the emergence of Roger Federer. And if R.F. Doherty couldn't quite match the historic achievements of Federer, who became the first man to win 20 major singles titles but never conquered Monte Carlo, he was still a truly great tennis player. That is evidenced not only by his 6 Monte Carlo titles but by the 4 Wimbledon titles that he won in succession between 1897 and 1900, and by the 3 Olympic gold medals that he won in doubles and mixed doubles, including the gold that he won alongside younger brother Lawrence in Paris in 1900. Even this cursory summary of the Doherty brothers' achievements is enough to prove that they were among the greatest tennis players of their era, which was really the beginning of tennis as we know it today. The fact that both Doherty brothers won multiple Monte Carlo titles and multiple major singles titles while never being able to breathe properly is surely the ultimate testament to their unquenchable fighting spirit. Rafael Nadal is truly the king of kings at Monte Carlo, having won the tournament an incredible 11 times, including a scarcely believable 8 titles in a row between 2005 and 2012. That remarkable run was only ended by Novak Djokovic in 2013, when the great Serb was beginning to enter his own pomp as a player, but for good measure Nadal went on to win a further hat-trick of titles between 2016 and 2018. Indeed, his utter domination of what was the original Triple Crown of great clay court tournaments, before the much later edition of Madrid, which he also won 5 times, is probably his greatest ever achievement as a tennis player, and it is highly unlikely ever to be matched, let alone bettered. And the fact that the other 3 most successful men ever to play at Monte Carlo did so over a century ago is one of the best signs that his achievements were genuinely historic.